A lot has happened since our last board meeting. We definitely haven't slowed down since our last board meeting. We did sign a milestone disposition and development agreement with our development partners. I was expecting some applause on that. Thank you. That was a lot of work, and we appreciate everything that went into that, and very glad to have that milestone completed. We also met with several members of the media, resulting in a number of positive stories about the Point. We visited outstanding projects that serve as a model for some of our development. We've begun the process to create an arts master plan, have advanced programming for the Convergence Hall that we'll get to hear a little bit more about today. Received a public commitment from UDOT this last week to install light rail in the Point of the Mountain area. We met with our community advisory committee. We've presented to local city councils, participated in the launch of the Utah Innovation Fund, worked with the Canyon School District to advance plans for a truly innovative high school at the Point, and many other things. So we're just so excited for the great progress that we've had in the last month, and look forward and are excited about what's going to happen in the next year. As always, we'd like to start our meeting with an opportunity for members of the public to share any comments. The Point is a public project, and as a board, we have a responsibility to ensure that this project reflects the values and provides broad public benefits. And so we always welcome input from members of the public. As we talked with many members of the media over the last month, one of the things that we really like to highlight is how much involvement we've had from the public up to date. And so we always start our meetings with that. So if there's any member of the public that would like to comment, this is the time to do that. If you're in the meeting room, if you just come up to the front presenter area, or if you're online, if you'd raise your hand. Let's go ahead and promote Kathy Richardson.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you very much. My name is Kathy Richardson, and I live in West Jordan, Utah. I also represent many Utahns who agree with my comments relative to the proposed Statute of Responsibility, or SOR. The SOR is in no way compares to the greatness of the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty symbolizes many of our great cornerstones of individual freedom, like life, liberty, and individual pursuit of happiness. That justice is blind, no two-tier system of law or different enforcement of law depending on what group you belong to, among other things. The SRR says that man is responsible to save man, but in America, it is God who saves man. Throughout history, America has called upon God, not men. This statue is an affront to God. The statue, along with the whole point you are going to build, is just like the Tower of Babel, proud builders of men who believe your idea is superior to the people. This authority is a public-private partnership, which is illegal, and it creates conflicts of interest. But the state legislatures have successfully codified this illegal authority. Governor Cox's statement on the SOR that the people need to be reminded of their duty to one another, and that government alone should not bear the burden of societal upliftment. This is an insult to the people. The government has created all of our social ills, and they tax us for it. Homelessness, drug addiction, mental illness, criminals, and terrorists coming over our border, human trafficking, the demise of the family. The stained glass in the rainbow colors represents diversity, DEI, and unity that we should accept all identities. DEI identity teaching is harmful to our children. Finally, does Governor Cox believe that our responsibility is to use pronouns like he does, that transgender men should play in women's sports, that we shouldn't complain about higher taxes, or that homes should be in tight quarters only? Perhaps he wants us to house immigrants in our homes and build ADUs on our property. Scripture, Galatians 6:5, states that for every man shall bear his own burden. I have more to say, but we'll reserve for another day. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Kathy. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak? Not seeing any, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, and that is to approve the minutes of the November 8th and November 21st board meetings. Representative Stenquist.
I move that we approve the minutes for those two meetings.
All right, is there a second? Okay, Chair Snow seconds that. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll place the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Rule that passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move to the fourth item on our agenda, which is the financial statement. As we all know, we have a responsibility to all Utahns to ensure the integrity and financial management of the point. And as part of that, we regularly review our expenditures relative to our budget. We appreciate the Finance Committee and those who serve on the Finance Committee, which include April Cooper and Jim Russell. They meet monthly with staff to provide guidance on our budgets and finances. And so I'll turn some time over to our Director of Operations, Don Willey, to provide a brief report on the financials. Go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Representative. Just want to run through where we're at this point of the budget year. We're looking really good. Again, as we've made some small budget adjustments over the last couple of months, always keeping the taxpayer in mind and making sure that we are doing everything we can at the optimal capacity with the least burden to the taxpayer. So at this point, the end of November, we should be at 42% expenditures of our budget. We're looking right now very healthy at those percentages. I want to run through some of them. We're burning a little bit high and just provide justification so board members are aware. First is on our in-state travel. We're running a little high on this just because we had so much travel associated with the development agreement signing. And so we anticipate that that will be reduced and go on a more regular cadence through the rest of the budget year. We have a significant expense in our out-of-state travel. That was from our recent site visit to California with our development partners to view several projects and get a better idea of architectural style, placement, and density. And so that was an expense we anticipated. One time we'll have some additional out-of-state travel expenses, of course, but not in this that high amount. Moving down, some of the larger percent that are smaller numbers, though, is our postage and mailing. That was simply a one-time expense. And so, again, that one-time expense was high at the beginning of the year. It will taper off, and so we'll see that percentage come in line throughout the fiscal year. Just a note, this was brought up, our attorney fees were, we just have a lag in some of the billing there. And so just again, with the requirements of the development agreement signing required us a lot of meeting with our attorneys through that process. And so that percent is a little bit lower than we expected, mainly just because we have not received several invoices, but those we'll catch up on that and report on that in our next board meeting. And then lastly, I'll just make call to the 73% on the data processing. That's burning a little bit high, mainly because we had some outstanding invoices we weren't aware of from DTS that had not been sent to us. And so that should have been billed in fiscal year 23, but ended up being billed in fiscal year 24. So we have accommodated those charges, but anticipate again that we'll be on track for with our budget through the remainder of this year. So overall, looking really healthy. 36% is where we're sitting, so well below where we should be projected at. And that's my report.
Thank you, Don, for that report. Jim Russell, you're on our Finance Committee. Do you have anything you'd add to that?
No, I don't. Thank you, Don. Things are going well, and appreciate the management oversight of the finances. And I know Don and Alan both take this really seriously and appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. I don't see April online. So is there any other members of the committee that have any questions or comments on this item? Not seeing any. All right, thank you, Don. We'll move on to the fifth item on our agenda, which is the approval of the infrastructure loan fund terms. I'm going to turn time over to Alan Matheson, and let me just state, Alan is joining us remotely. He's had some family health issues that he's had to attend to. And so we're just glad that he can be here to participate virtually with us. Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity, and I wish I could be there with you. I just have been taking care of some issues here and don't want to expose any of you to potential infection. Let me talk about this project here. It may seem like a little bit of deja vu that you have now, for the third time, been asked to approve terms for our loan agreement. And let me give you a little bit of background just so we're all on the same page here. The legislature has set up a four-stage process for approving use of the loan funds. It's a loan committee that makes a recommendation to the Land Authority Board. The Land Authority Board then approves terms for the loan. Those terms have to be approved by the Executive Appropriations Committee and then reported to the State Finance Review Committee. We started this process last summer, and the loan committee recommended terms for use of some of the $165 million put into that loan fund by the legislature. Again, last summer, this board approved those terms, and before it went to Executive Appropriations for approval, they indicated that they wanted to see changes to those terms. So we worked with legislative staff and committee, arrived at some mutually agreed upon terms, brought that back to this board on November 8th. You approved those terms. A week later, Executive Appropriations suggested that they would like to see some changes still. So they imposed some loan terms that are listed in the document that we sent out to each of you. Because the statute says that this body, the Land Authority Board, establishes the loan terms subject to approval, we think it's important that the Executive Appropriations terms and this board's terms be the same so that there's no question about the efficacy of the approval going forward. So we're bringing to you the specific terms that were approved by Executive Appropriations and recommending that you adopt those terms so that we can move forward. We are currently negotiating or drafting the elements of the loan agreement that would allow those funds to be available. The terms that have been approved by Executive Appropriations are $165 million loan designated for the backbone infrastructure that we've reviewed a few times, provided in three tranches of $25 million, $50 million, and $90 million at 3% interest for a 35-year term. One of the primary changes that they made was that the first payment would be due 3 years after each loan is funded, and that interest accrual would be deferred for 3 years after each loan is funded. So we've discussed the challenge of paying that with the lease payments, because we won't be receiving lease payments until there's occupancy of the structures at the site. But Executive Appropriations said that they would certainly work with us and make sure that we have terms that will be workable. So the request is that this board adopt the terms that were approved by the Executive Appropriations Committee so that we can complete our loan agreement and have the funds available to begin infrastructure development this spring.
Thank you, Alan, for that presentation and your work in getting this loan to the finish line. I know I also just want to express appreciation to the Executive Appropriations Committee for their interest in this and their safeguarding of these public funds. I think it was very evident to them that they wanted to ensure that we had the right structure in place to make sure that there was accountability for the money that's going into this. And so I think these revised terms are acceptable and that we can work towards our commitment to be able to complete this. So with that, is there a motion from the committee to adopt the same loan terms that the Executive Appropriations Committee had approved?
I'll make that motion that we adopt the terms as set forth by Executive Appropriations Committee for the revolving.
Thank you, Jim. Can I get a second?
Second by Mayor Walker.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Walker. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, I'll place the motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. I'll roll that passes unanimously. All right, well, we are ready to move to the sixth item of our agenda. And we have some representatives from the Utah System of Higher Education to update the board on efforts to program Convergence Hall and develop concepts for the Innovation Point or the Innovation District at the Point. Under the direction of Associate Commissioner Jefferson Moss, a lot of progress has been made in this area. And we're excited for what will be one of the first buildings at the Point, Convergence Hall, and are interested in hearing some of the thinking of the programming and the work that's been done to get us to where we are right now. So I'm going to turn that time over to Commissioner Moss and his team to introduce them, and then we'll have some time for any board questions and discussion.
Thank you, Chair and committee. Always appreciate the opportunity to come and present, and a lot of exciting things going on. So thank you. I'm joined by Gabby Tejas and Tori Hooper, who are on my team, and they're going to take different pieces of this specific to their roles. Gabby's been really helping on the commercialization side, which is part of the Utah Innovation Fund. And then Tori's job is the project manager for the Point. She'll speak more specifically to what we're doing with Convergence Hall. But just to give you a little bit of backstory, people often ask, well, what is an innovation district? We actually went through a process recently with a group that was trying to map out what we're doing around the state. And the question kept coming up, well, what is an innovation district? What's the difference between that? And there's not like a formal technical definition of it, but the main point of it is as you read here, it's just an ecosystem. It helps to advance technology innovation, to foster a startup environment, facilitating meaningful relationships among universities, businesses, entrepreneurs, to help nurture new ideas and research from the early stage all the way through commercialization, with the goal of helping to solve Utah's unique challenges. And that's what we really see the innovation district being, is that ecosystem. Our good chair here, who ran the original bill, we talked about this the other day, when this whole project was coming about. Intentionally, they said, we would like to have higher education play an active role in this. And some people have asked, well, why is higher education in that position? Why is this not just a traditional development deal? And I think there was some wisdom and foresight in what our good chair did, is that USHE as a system has the ability to bring people together, maybe in a different way than others might be able to. And we just highlighted some of the things that USHE can bring to the table. Obviously, they're really a connector of ideas, a place to collaborate, promoting cutting edge research to help solve big problems and commercialize solutions. There's a collaboration already built in at each of our institutions, whether they be traditional technical colleges or through our higher education, of farming partnerships and connections and working with all of our schools. So when you think about it from a statewide perspective, one of the things we've really cared about with this project is how do we make sure that this reaches all of our state? The fact that we have schools all over the state really helps in bridging those different areas. And then really that programmatic ecosystem to be able to build innovation that's going to help us drive us forward. And I've shared this with you before. This was a quote that actually came out of an early Brookings Institute article that says the long-term success of an innovation district relies on a collaborative approach to innovation. And innovation's work ethic and culture is to collaborate to compete, a bottom-up horizontal innovation model involving business, academic, civic institution, government workers, and residents to really work together. And as you see here, you've got this Venn diagram, and each of these silos plays an important role, but it's really the combining of the three is when you get to the heart of what really drives innovation in innovation districts. So just as I was asked to give a little bit of a kind of an overview, a little backstory where we've come from, and for some this is a repeat, but we wanted to again reiterate some of the things that have gone on in the process. We've gone through a series of phases. Our first phase was creating the vision. Second was laying the groundwork, and we're now in phase 3, which is actually creating the ecosystem. In the first phase, we took a 3-pronged approach. The first thing we did is we coordinated with all of our schools throughout the state to understand what their assets were, what programs were out there, what competitive advantages each of our schools had. We did site visits all over the world, looking at the best innovation districts and trying to understand what we could learn from them. And then the third was we created a visioning committee, and we brought together some of the most talented, innovative, entrepreneurial people in the state, from a broad spectrum, venture capital, higher education associations to help come up with the vision of what we thought this could become. So I'll just start with the first one, the internal evaluation connections. We learned a lot. Just spending at least a full day at each of our schools, understanding all the things that they're doing, what programs they had, what their commercialization abilities were, or maybe where their needs were. Looking at workforce alignment and how we're making sure that we're meeting the needs of innovation around workforce. And we really put together kind of an overview of all of those different capacities and built that into a tool. The second was our external research and strategy. As we went to a number of different places, we asked a lot of questions, learned a lot. We asked, we sat down visually looking at what they're doing, but a lot more of it was a lot around the programmatic elements. What are they doing in terms of integrating on workforce? What are they doing on funding? What are they doing, with their ecosystems? And then really the main one I love to ask is, what would you do different? If you could start this thing over and say, you're going to build this from scratch, what would you do different? We learned a lot from that. These are just some of the places that we visited and some of the key takeaways, the main lessons learned that we had through that. One was that proximity to industry clusters. And this was something early on, prior to having a discussion around Convergence Hall, we had the Innovation District located kind of on the outskirts. Early on, we said, in order for this to really work, you've got to have this at the core. It needs to be the heart of this development, which we've been very grateful that this board has supported that effort. And we'll talk a little bit about Convergence Hall. The second is really creating a vibrant and attractive place for young people that want to work, live, and play. That's so critical. Most of the workforce we're targeting is in that demographic. The third was having collaborative efforts across different disciplines and industries. That's where a lot of the innovation happens. It's bringing different ideas, different businesses, different concepts, and bringing those together really does create that new innovation. Placemaking, as I'm sure our folks at the development side are going to talk more about, that's absolutely critical. It needs to be a place that people want to be. And then the funding mechanisms, that's one that we really drilled down in and learned a lot about some of the areas that have been the most successful, had a really robust process of grants, loans, and equity. And that's what led to, we'll talk about the Innovation Fund. And then government being a partner in that and understanding what their role is. We know government doesn't play an active role in entrepreneurship. They shouldn't be active in that space, but they need to create the right environment, the right structure for businesses to thrive. The visioning committee, and I'll be quick on this one, but we like I said, we took a blank slate. We're coming up with what this could become. We had some amazing folks that were part of this, and a lot of the results of what we're going to present today came from some of those discussions. But as I mentioned, these are some of the folks that were part of that initial visioning committee. And one of those is Gabby Tejas, who at the time was working at Intermountain Ventures. We then successfully recruited her over, and she now works with us, but she started actually as one of our visioning committee members. So finally, and then I'll turn it over to Tori, but some of the main takeaways we came out of there said, okay, so we got all these wonderful ideas. What are some of the concrete things we knew we needed? The first was that convening space, a place to bring everyone together. That was critical. The second was this gap funding. If we really want to be a place that drives innovation and brings cutting edge research to solve big problems, we really needed a place to do that gap funding. And then the third is the strategic planning for the ecosystem. And I'm going to turn it over to Tori to talk about phase 2.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So kind of we're in the phase 2 of laying the groundwork, and the two pieces that I'm going to talk about are Convergence Hall and the Policy Innovation Lab, and turn it over to Gabby to talk about the fun. And so, as we know, in this past legislative session, we had the opportunity to obtain 50 million for Convergence Hall, which was a huge win for us and kind of in initial programming and everything like that, as we kind of focused around what was the purpose of Convergence Hall and like what's the core theme that we really want to focus on is that bumpability factor of making sure that we're having a scientist and a policymaker and an industry worker kind of all connecting together, running in, grabbing lunch, working at the makerspace, shopping at the retail. That way the ideas can come together and we can kind of hold onto those factors of that personal connection as well as just flowing of conversations and building new relationships. And so we really want to focus on how we can create, that's kind of been the core theme of the building and things like that. And so kind of where we wanted to kind of define where we're in the process as we've been working with LPC to go through some of the programming and helping us kind of finalize this direction. We've had the opportunity in the past about 8 months, kind of collect our information, having various stakeholder group meetings, seeing what we need from various stakeholders all around the state in a similar way to the visioning committee that they're industry, higher education, and government workers. So right now we've developed a program, we've gathered a lot of feedback, we're finalizing the program, and then hopefully soon we'll be onboarding an architect to kind of design this building. And as we've had the opportunity to talk with many people, we want this to be a really iconic building as it's going in phase 1 and to represent what we believe in innovation and how we want to focus on that. And so kind of from our stakeholder group meetings that we've had, having various ones, we're really focusing on who we want at this building. And we've kind of defined as obviously we want all the UC innovation and we want aspiring higher education students and entrepreneurs that are really focusing on how are we solving these big problems here in Utah? How are we gathering everyone together and focusing on like, how do we benefit Utah's problems? Hopefully both nationally and globally as well, as we know that Utah is very well defined and positioned to use our universities and to use our industry to focus on those problems. And so what we want to be there is kind of, we want this maker space, we want this prototyping lab, we want ideas and spaces for, again, that bumpability factor where people can connect and have conversations and kind of show off what they're thinking about, be able to prototype, be able to have that venture studio model where people have spaces to connect and create and to open up. And so again, these are kind of the entrepreneurs and the ideas that we're kind of being able to focus on are at Convergence Hall, thinking more about software, life sciences, AI, cybersecurity, advanced manufacturing and energy, and kind of focusing on how do we kind of create those opportunities to connect in those different ways and facilitating via lab work, prototyping again, and more. Also, but not only at Convergence Hall, but as a statewide effort. How do we kind of connect to the different resources we have around the state, what we can have at the point, but also making sure we're connecting throughout. So this is kind of very quick draft programming that we have kind of for the building, again, draft. LPC wanted to make sure that I said that, but we're kind of looking, definitely having that event space for that holds between, as we've done the research, we found that a lot of people are looking for event spaces that it's over 100, but less than 500, because as we get over 500, we're looking for, there's a lot more spaces, but they're quite costly. So looking between that hopefully 300 to 500 range, having some units for some housing, and then having a lot of kind of in that orange, that opportunity for different office spaces and workspaces and co-working spaces, and kind of being able to have those movable furniture and things like that to make different kind of versatile spaces, as well as for like the now, but also the future. And having that maker space to be able to include not only our UC institutions, but also like students and younger kids, and like teach them more about the different opportunities of STEM and entrepreneurship and things like that, as well as offering kind of, we really like this idea of the public lobby exhibition space. That way people can kind of have that connection through the retail and then into the Central Park area. And so kind of having the opportunity for them to walk by and see the STEM and see the innovation that's happening, as well as everything else that's going on in the building, and then those kind of rooftop areas for some opportunity to have and gather. And so kind of moving on from the Convergence Hall, another space that we have is the Utah Policy Innovation Lab. It's one of the other groundwork pieces that we realized as Jeff went around and was able to see all these different places is that we need a place for people to discuss policy in a bipartisanship way. As you can see, our advisory board, it's very bipartisan as well as the different 3 levels of government. And so really focusing on how do we make sure that we're getting policy? How do we make sure that we're getting policy that's focused on everyone and the different stakeholders involved, and that's providing informed decisions, not only for those that are creating, but for those that will be receiving. And so we've had a really unique opportunity to be a part of different AI, energy, facilitating those groups and bringing together different people around the community and state to make sure that they're making and having the opportunity to have their voices heard. So then I'm going to turn the time over to Gabby to talk about the Utah Innovation Fund.
Awesome. In the last board meeting, we spent quite a bit of time talking about this, so I'll be a little bit quick in what I go over here, but there's a couple of key developments I want to make sure that we highlight today. So just as a quick reminder for those who maybe haven't been as involved or just need a quick refresher, the Utah Innovation Fund is a $15 million independent venture capital fund created this last legislative session to help support technologies that are developed, advanced, or discovered at Utah institutions of higher education or in connection with institutions of higher education within the state. And really the key here is bridging that gap between industry and higher education. Historically, it's a known thing in commercialization across many universities, but especially in Utah, there's been a strong software ecosystem. But as we look at some of these more deeply technical or engineering areas, it's been a little bit harder for those companies to figure out how to spin out and be successful outside of the university setting. So we have an incredible board made up of people that have formerly been involved in investments or have led companies, have from major med device companies to starting and exiting their own startups. So I have a really solid board. One other thing I wanted to talk about that we've been doing as far as the people side is we've been building a robust analyst program. And so we recruit students from all the different universities across the state to be involved in this process and learn to understand these different types of technology, how they work, how they're commercialized, and help out with our due diligence process. And we've strategically targeted engineering, science, math, business. We've strategically targeted students from different areas to help with that collaboration across disciplines. So some of the resources that we have for our companies are listed below, a database of operators, and want to make it clear that across all of these things, our business service network, industry advisory boards, and database of operators, what we do is seek to connect. And so we don't have any type of exclusive relationships or anything like that with any of the groups. It's more of anybody in the state who wants to help support the ecosystem or outside of the state that has business services they'd like to provide or want to be involved. We do the best we can to connect the companies that we're looking at, whether or not we decide to invest, to these various resources across the state. And then obviously we have the venture capital fund, and we work a lot with later stage investors to show them the deals that we're seeing and ask, what of these types of deals would you be interested in funding later on if we could get certain milestones met? So we have numerous connections across the state, including all of the commercialization offices. So we have the formal board that you saw a couple of slides ago, but what we also have is on our monthly board meetings, we have representatives from all the different universities and technical colleges that are invited to participate in that and express their needs and what they're seeing in their specific universities or technical colleges. So this is just a section of some of the industry advisors that we have, but these large companies that have said, hey, we want to see what innovation you're seeing and would be happy to provide feedback on companies and things like that. And then again, I talked about the venture capital funds, both local and national, that operate in these key areas we invest in, as well as the business services. So things like legal, finance, banking, marketing, accounting, supply chain, et cetera. So we have been up and running since September, and we've done 4 deals, have had an incredible opportunity to see many, many things come across the desk, but wanted to highlight here much like everything else that we're talking about, what this is really helping to do is to continue to build that ecosystem so that when the building is built, that infrastructure, those connections with analysts, those entrepreneurs in higher ed connections will already exist. And so these are a couple of the deals we've done. Just going to talk very briefly about the problems that they're solving. So Inherent Biosciences, spin out of BYU, and they are tackling male fertility currently in that space. Many couples are misdiagnosed because the current standard of care focuses on female fertility, when 50% of the time it's actually male factors that are contributing to that. So they're focusing on male fertility. 3Helix has the unique capability to bind damaged collagen, which has unique applications to different therapeutics, including strong therapeutics for atopic dermatitis. Eden Tech, it's a company that has developed a technology that can increase the efficiency of desalination plants, so allowing for the same energy to be expended, but producing more drinkable water in areas that traditionally don't have access to drinking water, and that's out of Utah Tech. And then one deal that we actually voted on this morning out of the University of Utah is Rebel Medicine, and they're helping tackle the opioid crisis. They're a post-operative pain management drug delivery company that is showing some promising data in their early studies.
Thank you. And to wrap up where we've been, so that's what we've been working on. Again, these are all the critical elements that we think are important for the ecosystem. And as we look at what we're doing with the Point, we think these are going to be very complementary and supportive of those efforts. The next stage, which is the phase we're entering now, was really building up to you all doing your job with the development agreement. Once we've signed that, knowing that this partnership is definitely moving forward, we're ready to take that next step with the stakeholder engagement. And so we've been working with the folks at IPP around pulling together. We've got a number of folks that are already heavily engaged with us in different capacities of what we've been working on, but that are very excited about helping to continue to support what we're doing with the Point. And so we're in the process now of starting to build out these clusters, as industry advisory groups around each of these targeted areas. And so obviously we'll be still focusing on the programmatic elements, but this collaboration with IPP should be able to help us as you're looking to build out the rest of the development. How do we make sure that these industry clusters are highly engaged and helping to contribute to what will make this a really unique and innovative project? So that concludes our presentation. We're open to any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was really helpful. Let's go to the board for questions. We'll start with Chair Snow.
Thank you for the presentation. This is it's really exciting because I think for many, we envisioned this project to be intersect education with industry. And so it's exciting to hear about utilizing Innovation District, Innovation Center funding to solve industry problems, but also in the mix, not lose sight of higher ed's duty and mission to the students. And so, and one of the slides talked about the roles of the Innovation Center. And the very first thing that you highlighted was the students. And I think for our state, that's important that we not lose sight of that. And I don't think you are. What we're, I think, for many of us, for me, but for many, hoping to see one of the benefits accrue directly to our kids in this state who go to our universities and colleges and seek an opportunity here and maybe seek opportunities elsewhere, but utilize this project as a springboard and as an incubator for their careers. Here is my question. Two questions. One, as you've tackled this, which is massive, I can't really appreciate how you get your arms around all of this, Jefferson. So Representative, so I'm impressed and with your folks there. How has the response been from our higher ed institutions? I know you've all listed them participating, but Do you feel like they are grasping the value of this and that they're supportive?
Yeah, absolutely. They've been very supportive and the USHE board has also been very supportive. You know, when I first took this job, I went around personally to each of our schools and spent some time. When we brought Gabby on, originally we hired her as a consultant, and her first job for 6 months was just to go spend time at every one of our schools, and not just talking to the deans and the presidents, but literally talking to every professor that she could engage with that had some kind of role in this area. And so right out of the gate, I think that really helped to build that trust and collaboration. So I do think that they've been very supportive. Our monthly meetings, a lot of these schools don't have the capacity to do some of the things that we've been doing. And so they've been very excited about this idea that we get to share all what we're learning, the best practices, the relationships, and the fact that there are people who they can lean on. That's become really relevant, I think, to a lot of our schools. The other one is with the Convergence Hall, we've had a lot of interest and support on that. Every school we've talked to, you know, going up to Utah State or Utah Tech or Snow College, specifically, those that are off the Wasatch Front have expressed a lot of interest in being able to utilize this space as a place where they can come here on the Wasatch Front. Maybe it's a group of students doing projects for a semester or even for a day to come up and work in the makerspace. We've heard a lot of good comments about how this is really going to help to support schools, especially off the Wasatch Front.
Thank you. It's really exciting to hear. And so thank you, you and your team for that reaching out. I know down my way with Utah Tech, the coming of age of what you're doing here, along with them focusing on their future vision as being a Utah, as being a full-fledged tech university is incredibly exciting for them. And you've been very supportive, and they're doing some significant things down their way. As you know, just got authority to open up a patent office, which is pretty unique, and it relates so much to what you're doing here. My second question and last one is, for those who are from out on the outside looking in, and for lawmakers, for example, who have a duty to oversee state investment money, what have you given thought to as you move forward, how you're going to determine what are the outcomes and how you measure those, and how we essentially become accountable for those investments? Do you understand my question, Representative?
Yeah, are you referring to all the things we're working on or just the fund specifically?
Well, the investment funds, but it all relates to this property, this investment we're making for an innovation district, an allocation, and I think we are headed in the right direction. But think 5 years from now, whether someone says, is this allocation of land and resources and money, is it headed the right direction, and have we measured outcomes? Does that help answer?
Yeah. And I would say, I think the broader scope to a lawmaker is obviously the lease return, right? What's the taxpayer money?
That's the narrow scope.
Yeah. That's one that I would say a lot of them are ours is much more focused around how many students we're engaging, how many commercialization efforts that were it not for us would not actually be spun out, that would be sitting on a shelf. We quantify that in a number of ways. One of those is really our job is not to be the source for funds. Ours is a gap that we're filling, and that gap really for us to be successful is helping them to secure additional funds. So we really see that as one of our primary motives, is how many things have we converted from research into an actual business that's now a viable ongoing business? How much funding are we able to continue to help them secure going forward? We're highly incentivized to do that. Maybe Gab, if you want to speak to it on the other side of it, but in terms of the oversight of the funds itself, we follow a very specific due diligence process that we do put it through a very rigorous several step analysis. So from that perspective, I think we can make it very clear we're doing a good amount of research on the front end, but on the back end, that's where it really is about these connections, all these connections we talked about, The fact that somebody before would be a researcher who would start something, spin it out and have no idea where to go. We can come in and say, we can, like, for instance, we have some healthcare ones. We can connect them to hospital systems all over the country that they would normally not have those kind of relationships. So even that warm connection is the kind of thing that we really put as our, how we quantify the value we add is helping to them get to those kind of connections. But maybe you want to speak more specifically on the fund.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of overlap in how we've thought about it, but just specifically on the investment fund in general, there's obviously internal metrics that we're tracking that we have to track and all of that type of thing. But we've done a lot of thinking and had a lot of board meetings specifically surrounding this topic and how do we measure success in a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years, 12 years from now. And those are very different metrics than maybe what a traditional venture fund would say. But I think Jeff highlighted a lot of them. We want to see that the companies we're investing in are able to get next rounds of funding. We want to see that, as we look at the different problems they're trying to solve, those are key things that we're looking at. The student engagement is a huge aspect. We hope that our analysts will go on to have incredible careers and be able to have connections with venture capitalists if that's the route they want to go, and that we can serve as a pipeline for these different innovation groups from the student perspective. So very, very similar, but we are, we'll track those traditional metrics as well.
Thank you. And I'm certain that you will. And by the way, my question isn't intended to be a criticism. It's actually intended to enlighten us and the folks that may be listening what the long-term results are going to be, which are significant. The last thing I said, I didn't have any other question, but lawyers are famous. They're saying one more question or asking. But Utah is not the first state that has done this thing and leveraged it and moving forward. And this puts us, I think, in an elite class of other higher ed institutions that have already captured this and moving forward. Am I right about that, Representative?
Yeah, I would say that we found those that were the most successful happen to be in areas that you're not surprised by: Boston, San Francisco, North Carolina, that have been doing similar programs. What I think is also a little bit unique is the fact that we didn't use taxpayer funds directly. These were all funds, and this was Representative Stanquist's bill, but taking funds that had actually been earnings off of the fund of funds, which also never were actual taxpayer dollars in, but had used the tax credit of the state, but that these were returns off of that. So when the bill was actually submitted, there were no actual tax appropriated dollars. That to me is another very important part of this, is that we're doing with funds that were set up for the purpose of building an ecosystem. And really that was focused around tech. This was under the fund of funds, getting venture capital into tech. Well, that gap doesn't exist the way that it used to. We have plenty of venture funds in Utah now focusing on tech. Our gap really was in this deep tech, the more technical space, this research commercialization. And so when we looked at areas that really were doing this well, yeah, Boston, San Francisco, even in Israel and other places internationally, they all had a fund similar to this that really built that created that seamless transition from research out to actually getting it into industry. So yeah, we've used best practice models for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your response, and thanks, Mr. Chair, for letting.
No, thank you, Chair Snow. Are there other members of the committee who'd like to discuss or ask any questions? Seeing any. Do you guys have any closing comments you'd like to make?
I just wanted to highlight, I think, especially on the last question that was just asked, I think something that's really unique that we don't fully appreciate till we understand what's happening in other places is the dynamic of the connection between all the institutions of higher education in the state through the USHE system. That's something that doesn't exist in the other ecosystems. And so even though they have managed to be successful, that's something that a lot of people from the fund perspective and everything else, it's a major differentiating factor, because from industry's perspective on innovation, it's a lot more impactful for them to be able to go to one place and say, okay, connect me to all the different universities and all the different relevant professors or students and things like that. And so I think that is something that we need to keep in mind as kind of can be our competitive advantage moving forward.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Tori, Gabby, Jefferson, great presentation. I really appreciate your leadership on this issue. I often am asked by people who have questions about the point of what's the role of the state? Why does the state need to be involved in this project? And I think this is one of the prime examples of why it's so important for the state to get involved, because in a typical development, if the state were just to sell off this land, having this integration across everything we're trying to do in the point and having it right in the heart of the project just wouldn't happen. It wouldn't make sense. But as a state, we can take a step back and we can find what really is the best outcome for the state generally, not in the next 5 years or 10 years, but really, you know, in the lifetime of this project. And so I strongly believe that the success of this project that we have at the point is going to be dependent on the success of what you guys are doing in the Innovation District. So thank you so much for all that work.
Thank you.
All right, well, we'll move on to the seventh item on our agenda, which is the Lincoln Property Company Life Sciences campuses. We'll invite Patrick Gilligan, who's the Executive Vice President of the Lincoln Property Company, to join us, and anyone else that he has with him for his presentation. I'll mention that for some time we have envisioned a cutting edge life science campus at the point. And we know that our development partners will play a key role in making this happen. So today we've asked them to come in and share some of their work in developing life science campuses elsewhere and the lessons that they've learned that might be applicable to the point. So with that, Patrick, I'll turn the time over to you.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Patrick Gilligan with Lincoln Property Company and a principal with the development team at the point. Also sitting with me is Yuli Rivera. He runs our sort of regional life science best practices team, which will make a little more detailed intro to him as we get through our deck here. But wanted to spend the time today to kind of run through just sort of examples of various different life science projects that LPC is actively working on across the country, as well as some of the services that we're providing to different tenants, with the goal of helping this tie into sort of Jefferson, Representative Moss's, goal of Convergence Hall, which we're very excited about. We think it's a great attribute to this project and really will serve a heartbeat for not just the project as a gathering area entirely, but also really kind of help to stimulate a lot of interesting things that can happen at the point. So just leading off here, just from a background on where LPC is very active across the nation in the life science sector, covered most major life science markets, right, which we kind of refer to the West, which, is San Francisco, Seattle, San Diego, Boston, and the Carolinas, Raleigh-Durham markets. We've got about 10.5 million square feet of active life science developments and conversions that are taking place currently. That's about a $7.16 billion in value. 2.5 million square feet of that are life science tenant interior build outs, where we're working on behalf of users or different organizations who are using us in sort of a consulting and advisory role to implement their facilities. And then about 10.1 million square feet of life science assets that are under management. What's not in here is we also have a healthcare portfolio of about 35 million square feet that's across the country, and that's anywhere from medical office to other healthcare manufacturing facilities. This is just a select number of tenants and partners and occupiers that we work with across the country in the life science space. Again, just looking sort of regionally of where our offices and sort of clusters, or we call our life science hubs, are. Obviously looking forward to put in a big circle here in Utah, but clearly, got both coasts covered here and are active in all the major markets. So we'll focus on our West and Southwest region really quick. Let's make sure everything here. So again, in the West, about 6.5 million square feet, almost $5 billion worth of projects that are actively under management or under construction. Just a snapshot of our West Coast team that covers this space. You can see myself there. Didn't have time to get Yuli's shot in, but promise we'll do that next time. Sorry, Yuli. And just a representative example of various different projects in kind of different capacities in the West, anywhere from 77 Airport, which is a large lab and research office building, to Aperture Del Mar, which is a campus-like environment. to Paseo and Kaiser, which is more of a CGMP building, right? That's more of a life science manufacturing facility. 222 Fifth, which is a project which we're near completion on in Seattle, and then Ellison Institute in Santa Monica, where we're supporting or serving really in an advisory role on behalf of the tenant. And this is a project called Cascadian, and this is really interesting. We'll circle back on this and have Yuli spend a little bit more time on this, but this was a building that was originally built for Amazon Robotics, was delivered during COVID, which is a terrible time. But given the infrastructure that was put in place for this building to serve that initial user, it worked really well from a life science conversion. So we bought the asset, did a very extensive renovation, mostly on the mechanical and electrical and plumbing side of things, to bring this into a true life science building in the heart of South Lake Union. What's really interesting with this, and we'll get into later, is that we're really taking more of a, call it this collabs approach or spec suite operational program to sort of allow smaller users to get into these kind of buildings. Typically, a lot of the newer sort of fancy, shiny life science buildings you see across the country are really built for large sort of corporate single entities. But what we've really noticed throughout our market is that you're seeing much more demand, and like Representative Moss was saying, in terms of these synergies for startups and incubators, for groups to have a high quality building that they can get into, which aren't always available to tenants of that size. And so we're sort of trying to thread the needle with something that's relatively pioneering on the West Coast in this asset. So we'll circle back to this, but just wanted to sort of cue you on it as we get through things. Again, sort of looking at the range of different types of projects. This is more of a CGMP building, which again stands for commercial good manufacturing practices. So this is, again, we're actually making things on the behalf of the life science industry versus doing lab research and office space. 777 Airport. This is in Burlingame, California, in the airport submarket, which most of you probably seen if you've ever flown in there. Very massive project, been a great life science sort of hub for the peninsula. This will be, a Class A purpose-built life science campus, or vertical campus, if you will, that will, be a combination of lab and office space when delivered. Again, 465 North Halsted. This is sort of, again, an adaptive reuse of an old Flexier building that we've converted to a life science campus for lab and office space in Southern California. This is the AbbVie campus. A lot of you have heard of them, Allergan backed company, 1 million square foot campus. That's in Los Angeles. This was, we thought was a good representative. This is the occupier services team. So our corporate advisory group went in here and essentially helped the tenant convert this asset into a sort of trophy campus for them. And this is Aperture Del Mar. This is, again, sort of a good representative of a large format campus that's in Del Mar, San Diego submarket. 5 buildings, 630,000 feet, purpose built. Originally as an office building, sort of mid-construction pivoted, seeing the life science sector really pick up in the San Diego area. And then this is 100% leased by a single tenant. This is an interesting project that we are currently entitling in Seattle. It's called Fifth and Johns, right across from the Space Needle. Everyone knows what that is. But just, again, a way of seeing sort of how these life science buildings are really kind of start having the architectural characteristics and features of some of your best in class modern office buildings. So you're starting to see much more of a design driven approach and really kind of creating an interesting environment, which is obviously attractive to tenants and users and meshes well with the sort of overall community. And that's one sort of takeaway, I think, as you'll kind of see through these things, is that, a lot of these really great projects, they're scattered throughout, right? Some of these really great submarkets. So in like South Lake Union, you can have a life science building directly across from an Amazon building, directly across from a multifamily building, and, kitty corner to a, great little retail, old historic asset. So, and those have performed really well because they really do feel this, you're in this walkable environment that's got active use 24 hours a day. And that's where, just like everybody, tenants and users want to be in those best in class locations that have not just amenities within the buildings, where the neighborhood truly becomes an amenity. And we're seeing more and more of that everywhere as people start to come out of the COVID days and start to get back into the workspace. Really quick, I'll run through just sort of our active projects in Boston, because they're just good to see again, about 2.5 million square feet. That's currently under construction, about $1.5 billion in value. Again, mix of call it Class A R&D office buildings to CGMP facilities. I'm just going to kind of scan through these, but again, a little bit of everything. Then again, obviously Raleigh, Durham and Carolina is another really good market for us. We're extremely active. We've been about 1.5 million square feet, currently under construction, $700 million worth of value. And one of this, which is really interesting, is obviously a partnership with NCSU Centennial Campus, where this is a 32-acre site that kind of basically meshes into the North Carolina State University campus, and it will serve as basically an innovation district extension for that university. So again, sort of picking up on a lot of the similar themes that Representative Mawson's team was discussing earlier. And another, this more of a CGMP manufacturing facility. And same here. And lastly, and I'll go back here to Yulee, but just wanted also, we didn't have in this deck, but we have a snapshot here. Is again, we were engaged by San Diego State through a public process to be selected as the developer for their innovation district, which again, you can kind of see next to Aztec Stadium there, which we look forward to breaking ground on in 2025. So a lot of good synergies here with what we're trying to do at the Point, with a lot of the best practices we've learned as a company on the national level. And then I'll segue here to Yulee to talk a bit about what we're doing on sort of the smaller format approach to helping to find ways to get a lot of these incubator companies into more Class A environments, into sort of these districts where you want them to be part of, because we do believe in the growth strategy and the value proposition that exists there. So I'll back up to Cascadia, and then
Sure.
Yulee, you want to take it?
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so as we mentioned, as Patrick mentioned, we're building a new project called CoLabs, and the idea is to build a biotech incubator for biotech startups, but a little bit more mature beyond that early stage. You're talking about some initial venture capital, but you might not be at the point where you're financially sound to take on a 10,000, 15,000, 25,000 square foot facility, mostly because in the world of a startup, you don't know what your next year is going to look like, let alone what 5 years is going to look like. So, as Patrick has shown you, Lincoln has an extensive knowledge and background in building out facilities. And I think part of it is we want to cater to the specific market that we're in. So, Seattle, the past 5 or so years, consistently tops out at the developing market for biotech. But when it comes to the developing market, that means we have a lot of biotech startups, but they're more in those, 25, 35, maybe 50-person startups. So we want to be flexible and build for the community because we want to be partners with that community. So that means we're going to go outside the box and build something that you don't see typically outside of more developed markets like Boston, like San Diego, like San Francisco. But we're building out two floors for our incubator space where it's over 62,000 square feet, 40-60 split of office to lab space, and where we can take teams of 2, grow them to 35, taking anywhere from 1 bench to 2,000 square feet, really nurturing to their growth and being partners with them in their journey and adapting to them, and then hoping that we can nurture them to the point that they're taking up additional space in the rest of the portfolio. Part of this too is beyond operational support. We want to provide a community where they're along other like-minded ventures like themselves, where they can share their experience, their challenges, and learn from each other. And also we can leverage our strength as an overall organization to get these teams greater savings that they can from vendor partners, from suppliers, and get eyes from investors, get eyes from other organizations that might want to partner. So we want to be one big community in Cascadia with CoLabs, but then also connect to the greater community and be partners to the greater life science community. I think you'll see in developing markets, there's not a lot of support for early stage startups especially once they get that initial capital, right? That seed, maybe pre-seed, and then they're kind of on their own. It's this cliff. In Seattle, I always say that we have initial spaces for, 1 to 2 founders. It's that, 4-bedroom apartment you share with your friends. And then all the other options are big 30,000 square foot facilities, which are your 5-bedroom houses in the suburbs. There's no 2-bedroom townhouse in the city, right? Where you can develop and mature along with your team. So that's what we're building here. And we want to make sure that we're building the right thing for the community that we're going to be partners in. So Lincoln Property has been working on this project for the last year, and they brought me on board. My background's managing an incubator program at the University of Washington for biotech and life science companies, where we would incubate companies of 2, grow them to 35, anywhere from raising a seed round to a Series A. One company got a little bit beyond that. We over incubated them a little bit. But that's the thing, is that we have programs to support early stage startups, but we don't have a lot of programs to support them in that mid-tier stage. And that's what we're really excited about doing with CoLabs, and then replicating that program as need be.
Yeah, no, thank you, Yuli. And so, again, relatively new concept for the West. Obviously seen some great examples of it back east and other markets, but we're excited to be launching this in Seattle. And we think there's a lot, again, good synergies in terms of this approach, where you're now allowing different size tenants to come into a more Class A environment and have that more Class A user experience, and then also being able to partner creatively with the university system to find these opportunities to get in there. And from a landlord side, right, it's great. It finds new ways to occupy buildings, especially during challenging environments. And it's always great to have a tenant that's growing, right? These means they need more space. They like the building, they want to stay put, or they want to potentially find a different experience within the market. So we're very excited to be kind of leading this new concept in the West. Relatively, you've just seen it sort of in a few different companies, like publicly traded REIT, life science specific. But I think, again, bringing in all the different knowledge sets and platform that we have at Lincoln to, again, sort of see what's working nationally and also provide that sort of bespoke solution locally. I think it's going to be a fun approach here. And again, very excited to be partnering with Representative Moss's team on this endeavor. So with that,
I was going to say one last thing about CoLabs. The thing is, we are bridging that work from those university spinoffs, right? And the idea is, if we can support those early stage startups from the university spinoffs, what we're doing is we're able to retain the talent that's coming from the university system, right? Whether they're locals from that community or they move there, that state, those universities have spent a lot of time and money training these people. If we can support them in their avenues beyond that, right? If we can give them commercial pathways with STEM, then what we're able to do is retain said talent, right? Retain these like highly trained individuals, and then give them the proper support to create their businesses there. And then eventually, once we create the proper resources, we have the right community, then we can even think about, attracting talent. But first, it starts with retaining the talent that we're developing at the local community, right? And one of the projects I'm also advising in is at the University of Alaska, my home state. I'm also helping them create an innovation cluster. And, it's going to look different than what you're all creating here, what is being built in Seattle. But the idea is the same: is how can we retain talent? How can we retain our young people into the state and help them develop our local economy and create that economic development?
Great comments, Yuli. Happy to answer any questions or any comments.
Great. Thank you for that presentation. I know Representative Stenquist has a comment, so let's go to him first.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation, and certainly, and I like how you're thinking about the types of partners that you want to have in these types of areas. Just sort of a general question on, as you're looking at different types of products and building types and so forth, do you have like a target range in terms of height on some of these buildings?
Sure. So, what makes a life science building a life science building? There's a lot, sometimes they look just like an office building, but they're very different from a foundational standpoint and obviously from the interiors. But, they're heavier buildings, right? They need to be much more structurally capable given the
Because
live
of equipment
loads
and things
for
like that.
equipment, mechanical systems, right? They need a lot of power. There's a lot of mechanical, from ventilation, especially, to provide good air circulation. And again, clean room environments, et cetera. So all those things have to be taken into consideration. So it's a beefier building at the end of the day, which is why they're so much more expensive than a traditional office building, right? Anywhere from 40 to 60%, in additional costs over what your traditional office building core and shell would be. And then obviously the tenant improvements that go into it, right? When you're building out that space, it's very expensive,
Right.
whether it's raised floor, clean rooms, the amount of plumbing and electrical and just all the different finishes that need to go into it is
All the HVAC and all that kind of stuff,
exactly,
yeah.
like very substantial investment. And then you get to a height concern given that, you can't have a vibratory issue because these buildings are so mission critical from a research standpoint. So the taller you get, you start facing wind loads, et cetera. So you don't really see a lot of life science buildings over 12 stories tall. You just don't. They start getting almost prohibitive to build at that point. So which is why you've kind of look at different representations throughout the country. You'll traditionally see them, for the bigger life science building will be, maybe 15 stories tall. And, typically steel or concrete frame buildings. We have seen some folks lean into the mass timber world for that product type. It just kind of depends on what the building codes are like there, but traditionally they're going to be concrete or steel framed buildings. But you do have, some limitations on your overall height, bulk, location. Hey, if it's right next to a train station, you got to be concerned about what's the vibratory concerns that are there, and all those things go into consideration when you're building a project of that type.
So there's not really a target range that you're looking for, but more just, but there are natural limitations to what you would want to.
There are, yeah,
easily.
there's cost and geographical and obviously, physical limitations of those buildings. But I think, for us and the beauty of sort of the way that development agreement set up is there's a lot of flexibility again, where we can put these buildings. But in our opinion, the way we've sort of laid out what's happening at the point in phase one really kind of creates a great foundation for just an overall innovative district by design, right? Of having this interstitial set of amenities and different types of building products that all kind of share a similar space. And I think will really be cohesive in that standpoint. And that's why we sort of reference, Seattle and some of these other markets where you have these buildings scattered throughout. They don't sit isolated on a campus anywhere, right? They're really woven into the fabric of the community. And that's where we see the most success in our opinions.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative. Chair Snow.
Thank you for presentation. And Representative Stenquist asked a question that I was going to ask in terms of what describes a life science building. You've done a good job of that. And my follow-up was, as it relates to phase one, the agreement we've just reached, and the fact that the innovation district is going to be in close proximity, if not right there, part of it. I think what you're saying is there's nothing that would prohibit what you've looked at thus far from life science buildings being incorporated. And if I read you correctly, you think this may be a great spot to develop these early stage startup kind of buildings. Am I right about that?
Correct, especially with Convergence Hall, right, being this sort of focal point of the point, and having that sort of, again, serve as this really unique amenity that I think is very special, and it would be unique to any market, especially here in Utah. But we think there's obviously there's a better chance for synergies having a collab style concept being within this, phase one than it would be out on its own, or if you're trying to sort of pioneer it elsewhere. So we think there's a great opportunity there potentially to do that. And again, I think, our goal, as we start really marketing, phase one and kind of building the collateral there is, yes, there's, office opportunities, life science opportunities. We have this great way to really incorporate all these different uses, given the way we've set up the development agreement, to just be very flexible and to make sure that we're meeting market demands and moving the ball forward. So, very excited about the different opportunities for users big and small to come in here and work in a more innovative approach within the ecosystem.
And your co-presenter, and I apologize, I've forgotten his first name.
Yuli.
Yuli, I really liked what you said about how this lends itself, this use, to retaining talent. And for our state, that's a big deal. And maybe I'm just speaking alone, but I don't think I'm the only father or grandfather that is interested in retaining local talent, especially if it's my children and grandchildren. So I like that. And I think what you're saying is that in some markets that don't have that ability, that haven't built these to scope, oftentimes that the only place for that talent to go is outside of state, outside of the area. So I just want you to know, I think for our state, that's an important element. I'll go back to Patrick. On the other hand, but in addition to early startup kind of applications, if a major existing life science company wanted to locate within phase one, there's nothing that you know of that would keep that from happening as well. Is that correct?
No, absolutely. I think there's ample opportunities for large format users to come in, and we'd love to see that happen. Obviously, they could be a great win for the project. And our goal is, and hopefully, as we demonstrated just through our relationships with national tenants in that space, and also obviously resume of building these, purpose-built or, dedicated life science, true R&D office facilities that, we'll be able to advertise that very well on behalf of the Point.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you, Chair Snow. Mayor Wilson.
Thanks. It's my question sort of builds on the conversation that's going on about the design of physical space and who would occupy it. And I'm wondering about the changing nature of work. My husband built a company from our kitchen table and sold it and never really occupied much space. And it wasn't always convenient when I had calls like this, but I know that there are a lot of people that are working from home now in tech. Of course, it's different as you lean into some, get into manufacturing. And so I'm just wondering about the changing nature of work, what's attracting employees in this era, and how are these buildings changing based on many people choosing to work remotely?
Yeah, a great question, Mayor Wilson. And I'll sort of go from a high level lens in terms of, if we're just talking about work and not specific to the life science space, but overall office use. One thing we're seeing nationally is a trend. We share these notes, obviously, as a big company does. In all our markets is, the last cycle, it was really a market sort of lifted all boats, right? If you were a 1960s building across the street from a, brand new building, you may have had different price points, but both sort of rose with the tide as the market was going up. Now what we're seeing is it's very much a flight to quality, and quality being not just the building you're in, but what is the neighborhood like, right? It's now, okay, yes, I love my building. It's got the gym, it's got the bike room, it's got all the fun stuff that we always want in a Class A building. But what's my neighborhood like? What's it like when I step out the doors? And we're seeing more and more of this sort of domain-oriented approach to real estate from an occupier level in regards to they're judging the building, they're judging the group that's operating it, as a landlord, property managers, and the location specifically, and what's around it. And so I think that's what, we have a great opportunity, and what, I think we've really leaned into the last sort of year and a half, working with the board here on putting the development agreement together, is that we're going to have a special place, right? And this is going to be, one of the greater features of the project is, our priority zone, the amenities that we're providing, the open space, that, and we're going to have great brand new buildings. So we really think we're going to, be able to capture, hopefully, the majority of those folks that do want to go back to the office. And we are seeing more and more demand slowly throughout our different markets. Some states are have a higher percentage and some are lower, just depending on kind of where they are and sort of what their main occupier population is like. But we have seen, consistently over the last couple of years, a trend towards, reoccupation. Now everyone's thinking differently about office space. Is it more hybrid? Are they, now they're going back to bigger offices and less sort of, shared benches. But maybe everyone's not in the same day. So it's kind of fascinating to see how it's all evolving, but what we've seen sort of consistently is that high quality buildings and high quality locations and amenitized locations are outperforming the rest of the trend. And the second part, from a life science standpoint, unfortunately for probably those folks who are working in the life science industry, is like, you can't really work from home in that business, right? You need to be in the lab, you're doing the research. It's not something you can really do from your garage, at least not yet. And so, those buildings are relatively well occupied. When there's tenants there, because they're actually the people who are doing the research, and those are jobs that just can't be done from home. So again, I think it's, we've been seeing both of those trends in both spaces and more recently. And again, it seems to continuing to evolve into this sort of, flight to quality, flight to neighborhoods, flight to amenities, and those buildings are actually performing considerably better than more antiquated assets or more obsolete assets that are out there.
Does that answer your question, Mayor Wilson?
It does. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Walker.
Yeah, could you go back to that slide with the Aztec Stadium?
I can. Hold on 1 second. I find it. Where'd it go?
Yeah, I just want to say that's awesome. Biotech campus integrated in with the stadium. Good work. I'd like to see that in the future. That's it.
No, you got it. Like it too. It'd be a fun project.
Love the consistency there, Mayor Walker. Are there any other members of the board? It looks like Director Starks.
Good morning. I apologize I can't be there in person, but really encouraged by this presentation. From a state economic development perspective, we're really honed in on the life sciences. And I just appreciate, I think, your thoughtfulness in articulating the vision for this. My question is this: knowing that the market is cooled a bit, knowing that the office environment has certainly, kind of gone south, maybe this is a question, maybe it's a statement, but like, what safeguards do we have to ensure that we remain focused on the life sciences, as opposed to, taking a quick win if there's a retail shop, or if there's something else that's maybe not as good, but that gets us the immediate win? Like, how do we ensure that we're focused on the life sciences in the long term? Does that make sense?
Yes, no, and great question. I mean, I think one, as a company, and as a partner with the Point Development team, obviously, and hopefully we demonstrated through our presentation, very focused on this space. Committed a lot of investment and time and effort building the teams over the last decade and greater, to be able to meet the demands that we're seeing in the market, so that we can play in the space, which is, for a long time have been controlled by a relatively small population of developers, and mostly publicly traded or users that were out there. So first and foremost, we've invested, at a team level into the discipline, and making sure that, we can, accommodate all sorts of tenants and users that are out there from any really, services line of business, whether it's, hey, we're going to build you a building, or hey, we're going to oversee your operations, or hey, we're going to help implement a TI package for you if you're going to be a true user owned asset. So we have the skill sets in-house to do that. Part of our marketing collateral will be really sort of obviously focused on that life science space from the offset. So really making sure that, we're getting out there to our relationships that we have, both here locally and nationally. And obviously Yuli's got a tremendous list of folks from all levels of classes in life science that we can, reach out to. But that's always been part of the marketing collateral plan, right? Is that, yes, obviously we want retail. Yes, we want multifamily. Yes, we want office users, but yes, this is definitely a part of it too, that, we don't think will be or should be ignored.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
I think part of that too is building the thing that the community needs. So part of, before this meeting, spoke to local members of the startup biotech scene and discuss, what they're seeing, right? They're the people who are actually doing the work here. Great work that's being done, and asking what do they need, and essentially building that. And, from their perspective, it's that support in that middle stage, right? That mid-size, that mid-tier startup. And I think if we're purposeful about what we build and build it for the community and the work that's being done there, then we can fill it with that work. Rather than building a big biotech space and hoping that we can attract the big pharma company to come in, I think that's when we pivot. But we want to be purposeful and build to the work that's being done here.
Wonderful. Thank you for your great work. And then I would just say, representing the Office of Economic Opportunity at the state, that we would love to meet with you sometime soon and help strategize and see what state resources we can put behind your efforts to attract some of those tenants. So
Yeah, absolutely. And our goal as we come in the new year is really dialing in a lot of our marketing collateral and then getting that in front of you to have those early conversations, which we're very excited about. So
Thank you.
We're hoping to share all that with you here in the coming year.
Great. Thank you, Director Starks. Are there any other members of the committee who'd like to speak? Seeing none, do you guys have anything you'd like to summarize on?
No, listen, as always, appreciate the time, and always great to see everyone and be in front of the board. So thank you, and look forward to moving things forward.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for that great presentation. Very exciting stuff. All right, we'll move on to the end of our meeting here. We have just a couple quick items. One is, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we did have an opportunity for a number of the members of the board to visit some of the innovative developments out on the West Coast, and just wondering if there's anyone who'd like to share any thoughts from that, impressions, lessons learned, et cetera, to put on the record here. Chair Snow.
Well, maybe I can lead off with a couple of thoughts, and those who were able to go with this site on this site visit can add their own. I was telling Patrick before the meeting started that for me, being able to visualize what something looks like by looking at a drawing or a concept or a rendering on paper has its limitations. To those that are architects, I think they have the advantage, but I'm certainly not in that class. And being able to make this site visit and actually see what I envision to be the promenade, for example, some of those thoroughfares that were active, that included business and retail and walkability space and gathering space and recreation, really helped me visualize what I think we're hoping this project to include and to incorporate. In addition, visiting some of those buildings, the Google building, seeing first-class technology incorporated into the design and capturing, I believe, firsthand what we are going to try to achieve here, made a huge impact for me. And it also helps me explain to others what this project is going to be. Very valuable. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Snow. Any other comments, thoughts? Not seeing any. I'll just add my thoughts, which are very much in line with what Chair Snow said. I think the value for me was to be able to get a sense of what felt right for me, and it is hard, just seeing drawings to visualize that. But walking through and seeing a variety of different types of developments and the things that seemed to work or didn't work have allowed me to have a better sense of moving forward and what feels right for the point, and to help others understand the direction that we're going. So I think it was a very valuable opportunity, and appreciate all those who put efforts into making it successful. The last item I have here is just dealing with our next meeting. Typically, we would meet on the third week of the month. However, that is the start of the legislative session. And so we'd like to see if we can move our board meeting up. We looked at the week before, which is the second week of January on that Tuesday. However, there's a House caucus meeting on that day. And so we're now proposing that we move this board meeting to Monday, January 8th, potentially in the afternoon, as there's also a taxpayer association meeting that morning. Just want to throw that out to the board and see if that would work, or if there's major conflicts if we were to move it to the afternoon of the 8th.
Monday the 8th.
Yep, afternoon of Monday, the 8th.
This is April. I could do that.
Thanks, April.
I'll be in Dublin.
Oh,
Well, Ireland.
that'll be fun.
Yeah. But it'll be late there, so
Works out.
I guess it'll work.
Good. All right, I'm not seeing any major red flags, so I think we'll move in that direction. We'll have our staff coordinate sending out that announcement so everyone has plenty of time to prepare and do their best to accommodate that change. So I appreciate everyone's flexibility in that change. So unless there's any other motions before the committee, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
That's moved by Representative Stenquist. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. We are adjourned. Thank you. We'll see you on the 8th.